Hey guys, my name is Diana Garcia. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Florida, owner of a private practice called Nurturing Minds Counseling. All right, so I'm continuing the monthly book therapy series. So let's just jump into this month's pick. All right, so let's start off with what are we going to go over today? So we're going to quickly go over the book that I picked, a quick summary about the book, and then the 3 key insights that I picked out from the book, as well as who I think can benefit. All right. So as you can see from the screen, this month's pick is the proven power of being kind to yourself, Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristin Neff. So I actually have the ebook version here, as you can see, but I believe the workbook or actual book is the same exact cover. So this book was actually published in 2011. It's about 320 pages. This is actually one of my go-to books of recommendations for clients, especially because I use a lot of self-compassion in my work and encourage self-compassion with clients. And so this is just one of the foundational books that's really helpful. See from the screen, the book is broken down into 5 main parts. Part 1, it's why self-compassion. So she does kind of a mix of her journey, how she discovered self-compassion, and she does that throughout. She talks about her story, the reason she really dived into self-compassion, how it's been beneficial in her life, as well as just in general, she talks about why it might be helpful for you to jump into self-compassion. What would be the point of even starting to learn more about this concept? Part 2, it's then diving deep into what are the actual components of self-compassion, like what does it entail when we talk about self-compassion. Part 3 are the actual benefits of self-compassion. So she talks about emotional resilience, kind of motivation, not getting stuck in the self-esteem game and things like that. Part 4 is self-compassion and relationships. So she has a chapter on parenting. She has a chapter on kind of romantic relationships, love and sex, as well as just in general how self-compassion could be helpful in relationship to others. And then part 5, the joy of self-compassion. It's really more talking about, okay, now that you're practicing these skills, what can you kind of expect, or what would be really the shifts that you're going to start to notice in your life? So that's kind of how the book is broken down. So let's go through kind of the 3 key insights that I picked out. So as I was reading or kind of reviewing this book, because I read this book a couple years ago, and so I'm going to be honest, I was kind of trying to jog my memory and go through my notes and reread certain sections that I thought would be helpful. And just right off the bat, I picked out just a first insight that at the beginning of the book, she talks about why you even want to start learning how to be more self-compassionate. And I think this point that she makes literally, I think on page 1 or 2, that in our increasingly competitive society, it's not even kind of good enough anymore to just feel good or average. Right now, there seems to be a propensity to really feeling like above average and special, like kind of in all areas of our life academically. And I think you can even see that, where like parents want their kids to get into the best pre-K, and there might be like a waiting list to get to the most prestigious pre-K or kindergarten or whatnot. And just in general, that there seems to be a propensity nowadays to really feel like above average and special just to feel even good enough, right? And how this constant search of trying to feel good that seems to be perpetuated by our society just lends itself to honestly a distorted self-image and a distorted image of others. So for instance, she talks about if we're constantly trying to feel good about ourselves and constantly engaging in this evaluation with others, a lot of times that leads us to one, kind of negatively evaluate others to make ourselves feel better, right? But also sometimes it also lends itself to blind spots, because I might not be willing to take accountability about my mistakes, because she talks about that this lends itself to either I'm feeling really good about myself, or then the other end is that I start to feel really bad about myself and really self-critical when I mess up, right? So she gives an example, like let's imagine you get into a disagreement with your partner, and you are trying to protect your ego and you don't want to admit that maybe there was any fault. So it lends itself to this blind spot that no, my partner's completely wrong, right? Because I'm right and I have to feel good about myself, so I can't own or look at any mistakes, because potentially then if I look at mistakes, that lends itself to the other side of starting to be highly self-critical. And I will say I see this a lot in individuals, this propensity to be very self-critical and really harsh with themselves, and it lends itself to a lot of shame. So this feeling of feeling unworthy, and even in relationships, how that could show up is that, like the example she says, it's maybe I can't own this mistake because I don't just go into like, oh, I made a simple mistake, I feel guilty about that. No, it spirals into like, I'm a horrible partner, I'm a horrible spouse, whatever the case is, and a lot of shame feelings show up, which would make it really hard to admit that, right? So then you don't want to look at that. So I just kind of want to bring that nugget and make you aware, because that might be something that you notice in your life, where then you might be viewing others or yourself in an unrealistic light in order to protect your ego, and how that might not be helpful for you. Okay. The second nugget that I picked out was the 3 components of self-compassion. And I actually have a blog on this, so I wasn't even sure if I wanted to pick this part out because I felt like it was redundant based on kind of content I've done. But honestly, I could not skip this part because, like I said, she's the researcher, I think, that really came up with these specific concepts and did the research to come up with the 3 different components. So I wanted to make sure I at least review them. Okay, so when we talk about self-compassion, there's 3 core components. So the first one is self-kindness, and so that's really just how do you talk to yourself in a moment of difficulty. In general, but specifically like when you're struggling, when you're having a moment of pain, like how do you talk to yourself? Do you tend to be really kind with yourself, or do you tend to be really harsh with yourself? And a good kind of classic exercise is really like, do you talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend who's struggling? Or sometimes with my clients or parents, I talk about, would you talk to your child this way if they messed up or had a mistake? And most of the time, most of my clients or individuals can tell me like they tend to be a lot kinder to their friends or to their children than they are to themselves when they've messed up. So self-kindness is really kind of recognizing like, okay, how am I talking to myself in this moment? And what do I need sometimes when I'm struggling, for myself? The second part is this component of common humanity, and this one's a little bit more abstract, but it just talks about that when we're struggling, when we have a moment of pain, and I want to clarify, it doesn't have to be this like huge, like horrible moment of pain or suffering, like something catastrophic has happened. It can be like, I had a horrible day at work, or I had a disagreement with my boss, right? I had a disagreement with my partner or child, whatever. And that moment, it's still a moment of pain and suffering. And common humanity talks about, well, in this moment of pain, I'm actually connected to the grander scheme of all of kind of humankind, because everyone suffers, right? For their own unique reasons. But to be human is to feel pain at some point in your life. And so recognizing that your suffering can actually connect you, right? That I'm not alone in this suffering. The third part, it's this mindfulness piece. So one, it's just really being aware of your experience and dropping into that. So knowing like, okay, what is happening for me in this moment of pain? And this really key insight of like, noticing like what's happening in your body, what are the thoughts that are showing up, maybe physically what's happening, what are the feelings, but also and what that, looks like for you. But really importantly also with this mindfulness piece, it's not doing either of invalidating your experience, because that's not being present with your experience, or the other part of maybe over amplifying it, right? So not getting stuck in either or. It's just really coming back to like, okay, what is happening in this here and now moment, okay? The third piece that I picked out as I was going through the book, this I think is closer towards later in the book, but it's just this concept it's called Contingent self-worth. And so it's the concept that your self-esteem depends on your successes or failures, or if you're, getting approval or not. And as you can see here, I actually put a roller coaster because contingent self-worth, that's what it feels like, right? It's a roller coaster that you can never feel stable, because your self-worth and your self-esteem is constantly based on like things outside of you, right? In terms of like, it's based on what you're achieving, what you're working towards, right? And I've seen this actually a lot nowadays, and that it really lends itself to a lot of burnout, a lot of feelings of low self-esteem, because the reality is that you can't sustain that, right? We're humans, we have setbacks, we have failures, we make mistakes. Life isn't always going in the way we want it to go, right? We make decisions that other people don't approve of. And so that can lend itself, if my sense of self-worth is based on those things outside of me, that I'm constantly in flux, right? And it can also lend itself to like just constantly trying to get the gold star, the 100%, the 8 plus, because I want my self-worth. I want to feel good because it's based on that thing, that outer achievement. And so the opposite of that is really more of the sense of self-worth is more inherent, meaning that you don't have to do anything to earn it, right? Like you don't have to hustle to somehow be worthy. It's not based on your achievements. And it's not based on whether other people approve of what you do or don't do. And I know that concept can seem kind of hard, even when I explain that to clients. It's that you don't have to, earn your worthiness. You're already worthy. That's just an essential part of being human. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't own up to your mistakes or that you don't kind of look at when you've messed up, right? Because sometimes clients are like, okay, but if I'm just worthy, then that means I can just kind of cruise. And not at all, right? It doesn't take away your desire for values and growth and goal-driven activity, but it also makes it kind of gives you a secure sense of self, because it doesn't matter what you're earning or achieving, you're still feeling like stable in who you are, right? And that also kind of encompasses this self-compassionate piece of like, you can also be compassionate when you are having a setback, right? That you can really tap into that because you feel secure in that sense, right? Because a lot of times, if my sense of worthiness is based on what I'm achieving and then I fail, then I'm quickly going to spiral into a sense of maybe low self-worth and shame and being like highly critical of myself, because it's not just like I made a mistake or something bad happened in terms of a failure or difficulty. It's like I'm a failure, right? Who I am is a failure, right? Because of that self-esteem being based on something outside of myself, right? And so, all right, so last part is, who do I think can benefit? I know this might be a little bit redundant because I say a lot of times I think most people could benefit from this book, but particularly if you're someone who struggles with being highly critical of yourself, definitely pick up this book. If you're someone that you notice your self-esteem tends to dip a lot, or you are having a lot of this contingent self-worth, I would encourage you to pick up the book, because like I said, there's so many different insights that you can pick out from the book, as well as exercises to help you start applying this to your life. All right, and if you're finding me on YouTube, I encourage you to subscribe. If you're finding me on my website, I encourage you to subscribe to my newsletter. And lastly, like I always say, I really hope you continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Alrighty, thanks guys.